Oh, wow. Okay.
You're live, Your Worship.
Great, thank you. All right, council, I'd like to start this regular council meeting of February 28th, 2023 by calling it to order with adoption of agenda as amended with an inclusion to 11E with the map signage for the wayfinding. So if someone want to make that motion for me, please. Councilor Devlin, seconded by Councilor Orlando. All in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Adoption of the minutes of the special council meeting of February 9th. Someone make that motion. Councilor Cherry, Councilor Lucio, all in favor. Motion's carried. Adoption of the minutes of the regular council meeting of February 14th. Someone may make that motion. Councilor Stapleton, seconded by Councilor Devlin, all in favor. Motion's carried. Any business arising from the special regular council meeting of February 9th? Saying none, any other business arising from the minutes of the regular council meeting of February 14th? So I would like to bring forward, reconsider our action to defeat zoning amendment bylaw 2346 at second reading on February 14th, 2023. Under section 131 of the LGA, as mayor, I can bring that back within 30 days. So we're going to do that in a secondary way of doing it. So the first motion that I've just put is to reconsider bringing back the second reading. So will someone second my motion so we can discuss that? Councilor Cherry, now Councilor Orlando.
Yeah, Your Worship, I have a conflict due to an ongoing business relationship with the proponent for this one, so I'm going to step out for this discussion right
Great,
now.
thank you.
And you, just to be clear, you're just discussing to get it on the agenda now. It'll probably be
And
further
then
down
we're
the
going
agenda.
to, where there's going to be another motion if this passes.
Okay, for sure.
So we'll call you back in.
Awesome. Thanks a lot.
All right, so council, the reason I brought this back is we've had more information brought forward by RMR. They did another information session, and I feel that they've given us enough information for us to actually have further discussion on that. So my reason for bringing this forward is if we were to bring this to second reading and pass it at second reading, we now give the community a chance to speak to this. And I will discuss that if you will bear with me and actually put this motion through so that we can reconsider second reading. So any further discussion from council? Do you need any further clarification or want to make input? Councilor Palmer.
Thank you, Mayor Souls. It would have been nice to have had a heads up that this was coming. I know there was dialogue. I certainly had discussion with those that had the potential of bringing it back and made it clear that I was not going to be bringing it back. I'm opposed to the motion. And it would have been good to have had a little bit more time to put my thoughts together on this. But anyway, I'm opposed to the motion and a bit of a history getting to this point of reconsideration. And we're not talking about the application right at this moment. It's just whether we will consider it or not. And so going back in August, I think it was around August, my dates are going to be approximate because I didn't double check. The application came forward. I'm not sure exactly when it went to APC, perhaps September, October. It came to the new council. And this is where we're talking about this procedural thing of the consideration. And at that point, council deferred the decision to the new council and also directed to have a committee of the whole for the new council for a complete understanding. In January this year, I think it's noteworthy that there was a special social by RMR. I think that the public should be aware of that. Staff and council were invited to. I've been assured that there wasn't any dialogue regarding the application, but its timing is noteworthy. Then we had in last meeting, I guess 2 weeks ago, a special committee of the whole. 1 hour. That was a fallout from the application from council, or the request by the previous council to have a committee of the whole. It was 1 hour, and it didn't, in my opinion, didn't meet the spirit or intent of that resolution. It was rushed. I think I mentioned I was feeling pressured into making decisions. It wasn't comprehensive enough. Ultimately, it did go to the council immediately after to consider the zoning amendment bylaw. It was defeated in a split vote. Mayor Souls, there was an unusual move in that the developers were invited to the conversation and getting awfully close to entering even the debate at the table. I have concerns about the procedural stuff that as we move on, is this something, a practice that we're going to allow all developers in the future? And looking at the principle of fairness, that's a dialogue for another time. But it was close to being inappropriate, in my opinion. Noting that at that time, 2 weeks ago, council by a split vote said no to another special committee of the whole for a complete dialogue. And even though I was encouraging it for the information, council on a split vote said no to that special committee of the whole. It's questionable, I think, whether that committee of the whole should have occurred. Ultimately, the zoning bylaw was defeated, and here we are today. So I am just talking about the procedural thing. I'm not talking about the merits of the application. I think there's lots of merits, that's for another time. But we've gone through this process. This is, that the cat's got the ball of wool while we were out, and this has become a procedural tangle, and it's a mess, in my opinion. I feel that we're doing a disservice to the community on procedural fairness and allowing the community to have appropriate process. And I can hear the argument right away that you're going to say, well, let the public go ahead. No, we have been invited to, or been voted to look after the interests of the community, including procedural fairness. And it feels like every angle is being put on this, again, without going into the merits of the application, to force this down the throats of the community. And for that reason, I am opposed to the reconsideration. This is up to at this point, that zoning amendment bylaw is dead. There should be a good hard look at how we're going to proceed in the future. And so I will be voting against this motion.
Great. And your comments are noted. Any other comments from council? Any questions from council regarding this? So I feel that staff brought forward a good report on this, and based on that report and the answers that were given to questions from council, based on what you heard from the community, is the reason I'm bringing this forward. I think it's appropriate to bring it forward at this time. If this doesn't go forward, then yes, it's dead, and it's dead for a minimum of 6 months. And then basically you're telling RMR that they will have to go back to the table to decide what's going to be best for them moving forward. And you're saying to our staff that we believe that this is appropriate at this time. However, having said that, this motion is just to bring forward whether we want to reconsider second motion. So if there's no other comments from council, I will, Councillor Stickman.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Yeah, I just want to say, I hear what Councillor Palmer is saying. I understand his concerns. Ultimately, I have my concerns with this proposal as well. But I am in favor of this going to second reading so that way we can get the input from the public. And I would like to work with staff in order to make sure that that message is being brought forth and we can have that public dialogue.
All right. Thank you for the comment. Is there any other comments around the table? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of bringing second reading back on the table? That's what we're doing. Those opposed? No, Counselor Palmer is opposed. Rest of council is in favor. Now, I'm going to move this to that second reading of zoning amendment bylaw 2346 be reconsidered. Is there a seconder for that motion, please?
Can you repeat it? Sorry.
I move that a second reading of zoning amendment bylaw number 2346 be reconsidered. So does someone want to make that motion for me, please?
Just a clarification. So what was the motion that was just passed?
I move to reconsider our action to defeat zoning amendment bylaw 2346 at second reading on February 14th, 2023. So our corporate officer researched it as to how we should go forward.
Okay.
And by putting that forward, we now are allowed to bring the reconsideration of that second reading back on the table. So again, the motion is that second reading of zoning amendment bylaw 2346 be reconsidered. Do I have a seconder for that motion so we can discuss that? Councillor Devlin. Okay, so second reading is back on the table. So any further discussion on second reading? So basically, by bringing second reading forward, if we put this forward, then we can bring some things forward. So my thoughts were, if we're going to go forward to second reading, that there be an engagement process with the proponent and the community. So if we stipulate to them that they need to do a public consultation process, not just the binders we were talking about as a public hearing, but actually go out to the community, have something where they formally present to the community an open house where community members can come in. They can basically ask the proponent directly, talk about their concerns and be presented with that. Our staff could be present to talk about legislation process and go through that sort of thing. I think that's a holistic way of bringing second reading to fruition, and we actually get to hear from the community.
Sorry,
Corporate
Worship. Further to Councillor Palmer's inquiries, perhaps the motion could be reworded that second reading of zoning amendment bylaw, that zoning amendment bylaw number 2346 be reread a second time.
All right, so can you amend that motion then for me?
If
Councillor Devlin would be okay with that? Okay, so note that, Ms. Rousseau, please, in the minutes. So we're now reconsidering rereading of the second motion or of the second reading. So any further discussion from council? So Councillor Palmer has given his opinion as to what he feels. Do any of you want to address this? So by putting this through, but I'll hear from you first.
No.
Councillor Wilson.
Thanks. Mayor Schultz. After the second special committee of the whole, I am in favor of getting the public's opinion. I am still concerned about the checks and balances that the city would have to make sure that the proponent follows through on what they've said. But I do think that it's fair to hear the public's thought on this whole process.
Great. All right. Thank you for that. Councillor Cherry, any comments?
I'm prepared to move this forward for public
Okay.
consultation.
Councillor Devlin, any comments?
I believe what Councillor Jerry said. I think that there may have been a little misunderstanding after the first meeting that hopefully the second committee of the whole cleared up. We'll see how the vote goes, but that is my takeaway from the whole thing, is that perhaps there was a little bit of misunderstanding what the actual motion was on the table after the first vote.
Okay. Councillor Stapenhurst's comment.
No, I would just like to echo, that public engagement process, making sure that we, actively go out in the community, engage with them as much as possible, using all the news channels, having a public forum, and, creating that dialogue between the city staff, council, and the developers. So.
All right. Thank you for that. Councillor Palmer, any further comment?
Yeah. So my comments previously were on the procedural stuff, and I think this is a mess. But we've moved on to this point, and I'll respect the overall decision of council. On now bringing the debate back regarding the second reading, which was previously defeated on a split vote. I'm going to state that I'm, first of all, disappointed that this discussion is happening right now. Mayor Souls, you had the opportunity of 30 days. It would have been nice to have had the courtesy to have had the time to get my thoughts together, but I'll press on. I started off opposed to this because I saw a lot of problems that's bad for the community. This is not meeting, there was not the assurances of how we're moving ahead for the community and those community values that we have. And I talked at length about that before, and I won't repeat that because that was with the previous discussion. Now that, with the second committee of the whole meeting, which was questionable, I am now more convinced that this is a deficient planning process. It's has enormous risk to the community. I'm not in favor. So the question will be, well, why don't we just put it in front of the community? This thing is a mess. And we have that ability to cut these things off beforehand so we don't get the community up in a big uproar. And this is going to be very, very difficult for them to understand. Over 30 years, including lots of planning, big planning initiatives, big resorts and things like that, this has the fingerprints of coming back to haunt. I really do believe it'll come back to haunt the community. We are giving one developer special privilege over and above other places. So we're, on the zoning thing is about density. It's a density shift on this table. It's been argued to us that the table is problematic. And if that was true, and I don't believe that is true, I think there was good reason for that table. But they're saying that the argument that's been given to us is we should go to the public because the developer should have more rights and more flexibility. But there was reasons for that. And if we're going to give flexibility to this developer over and above others, specifically on density we do at zoning. So I think there is a potentially very grave misunderstanding on the rights of density on these parcels. If this goes ahead, we are giving entitlements to the developer on density. And it's been a little bit of a smoke screen in front of us saying, well, don't worry, we'll get it at the development permit process. We cannot take away that density. There's people that have been very critical of Mackenzie Village, for example, that got density and didn't like what was happening there. To me, it's irrelevant because that was a decision before me, and they have that right today. So now with this, unfortunately, I don't have all my notes here for this, but unfortunately, what's going to happen is this potential right has so many permutations. We've been focused on parcels 4 and 5 and presented a picture of basically a residential or living spaces for people to live, whether that's vacation rentals or for homes or rentals or whatever that is, which is wide open for the resort. But we're also talking about density shift on commercial. So what's really, we're going to give them the right to that. This land is going to have an enormous increase in value. And we don't know, I don't know if they know or not, but those rights are going to be entrenched for future owners, however that's gets split up. And we cannot unreasonably take those rights away. What would be the proper process, since we've been focused on parcels 4 and 5, is do it just like every other developer that asks for zoning amendments or zoning change. Show us what you're going to do. We'll consider that on those parcels and consider what that in the community values and give that application. So if we need an adjustment on the table for parcels 4 and 5, bring that application. That's a total different application. Rather than giving this mysterious thing, they've admitted that they don't know what they're going to do. They just want to be able to whatever, figure it out, get the entitlements in place first. Every other developer, we require the planning, we require the work to be done. And this is the biggest one. This is one of the biggest, arguably the biggest issue on our development. This is possibly the biggest decision that we're going to be making at this council. And I believe we're making a mistake. I probably have a lot more to say, but I'll leave it at that at this point.
Okay,
Mayor
thanks for
Souls.
your comments. Mr. Simon, you've turned your camera on. Do you have a comment or want to state anything at this point?
Through your worship, no, Ms. Floyd had, I just wanted clarification on the resolution that was on the table with respect to public engagement, but Ms. Floyd had clarified that for me.
All right, thank you. Any other comments from council? Councillor Devlin.
I'll take one. So I think this is what I was talking about with respects to Councillor Palmer when I say there's a misunderstanding about what's on the table. You're talking about development applications being brought forward for shifts of density, which is exactly what this motion is meant to allow. Right now, our bylaws do not allow them to apply for shifts in density. And when you say other developers should have the same process, we don't have other developers that have resort agreements. We don't have other developers that have this kind of parcel of land, this kind of process brought by the BC legislation that kind of coincides with us. What we're trying to do is bring this all into alignment so that the BC legislation, our OCP, and what our zoning bylaws allow, all allow the same thing, which would be exactly what you're talking about. Process, applications being brought by as those shifts in density are requested. And I think this is the fundamental misunderstanding we're having about this, is we're not approving any shifts in density with this bylaw. What we're talking about is amending the bylaw so that they are able to request those shifts between lands they already own. We can say no to those shifts. We can say no to this bylaw. What that's going to do is it's going to force them to build a very dense residential or commercial village up at the resort because they will have no option but to develop there, which is something we don't want. Be detrimental to our downtown, detrimental to our heritage, would be detrimental to our community if they have to go that way. Now, that doesn't mean we have to approve any shifts in density, but we at least have to be open to that conversation because I see no way that not being open to that conversation is going to protect the heritage of Revelstoke as a whole. So that's about all the comments.
All right. Any other comments from council one last time? Councillor Palmer.
Through to the planner. So Councillor Devlin explained that. Do you concur with that 100%, what was just stated?
Mr. Simon.
Through your worship to Councillor Palmer, the way that this would be brought forward is consistent with what Councillor Devlin has just indicated. We would bring forward a application. It would probably be considered concurrently. So council would see one staff report that would consider a resolution to approve the shift in density once it is requested by the proponent, as well as another resolution to consider a development permit. So they would be two separate resolutions. The first one, council would need to approve the shift in density at a future point in time. Then the second one would be approving a subsequent development permit in accordance with the development permit area guidelines of the OCP. So does that provide clarity that there still would need to be a subsequent council resolution to approve the density shift based on the wording that's included in the proposed text amendment? And I just want to, there has been a lot of back and forth with staff and the proponent to get the application to this point. And I think that's an important point. I know sometimes maybe from the public or council's perspective that these things are just brought forward. This was rigorous back and forth with the proponent to get something in a format that staff's view is tolerable for the community and for council to consider. There's two safeguards in place, one of them being the cap on overall density being 15%, no more than 50% from area one shifted to any other area. And the other one being that it's still subject to city approval. So as Councillor Devlin said, this would need to come back for council to make a resolution to approve that shift in density before they would pass a resolution to approve a development permit that would act on that shift in density. So I hope that provides a little bit of clarity in how the process would unfold. But if there's any other questions, happy to answer.
Mayor, so Mayor Souls, I guess first of all, no, I'll ask a question if I can to the planner. So this is a zoning amendment to adjust that table to allow density shift. Is that correct?
Through your worship, Councillor Palmer, it's a zoning amendment that would set the stage for a future request in shifts in density to be provided by the developer. And it would set the limits for what that shift in density can be, being 30% from area 1 with no more than 15% going to any specific area.
And further through the planner, so you're suggesting then there will have to be another zoning amendment in the future in order for the any shift in density to happen?
Through your worship, it wouldn't be a zoning amendment. It would be a subsequent council consideration of a resolution as the land use authority to approve the shift in density based on the wording of the existing text amendment that is contemplated through bylaw 2346. The text is very, very clear that it says any shifts in density is subject to approval of the city. And the only parameters that it gives to guide whether or not that shift in density should be approved is if it's consistent with the master development agreement. That's where we're trying to work within the confines of the existing bylaw to get that alignment that Councillor Devlin was referring to between the MDA, the OCP, and the zoning bylaw.
And Mayor Souls, I'll just make I just want to make a general comment. I don't want it to be the main thing, but first of all, I super appreciate the work that the planning department. We've gone from an era of being very adversarial to the development community a few years ago, and very it was a sort of a bad situation. We've gone to a situation where we're open for business again, and I think that's really good. I really like the work that the planning department is doing, and we'll even see another one later on today of sort of more innovative approaches of how we approach things like density and modern approaches. I appreciate the creativity but also there's a concern that I have on these innovative approaches that we may be swinging a little bit too far or a lot too far. So one last question through to the planner. So based on what you said, council will have the authority to change density without rezoning?
Through your worship to Councillor Palmer, the current wording in the text amendment says you can shift X amount from area 1, maximum 30%, so long as no more than 15% goes to any one development area, subject to approval of the city. So I would say this is it's a unique way to craft the CD zone that you're basically allowing in principle the density shift, but that density shift still needs to be approved by the city. And whether or not the proponent at that time in the future has addressed all of the items to the land use authority's satisfaction, being council, that's a decision for council in the future to determine whether or not a shift in density is appropriate at that time when it is requested. So this allows them to basically get an application in the door without having to go through a zoning bylaw text amendment each time they want to shift density.
Through the mayor, is there any other parcels within the municipality that council has the prerogative to accept or reject density changes without rezoning?
Through your worship, I want to be careful how I say this because it's a different scenario and there's different legislation to guide it, but it is, I would say it's in some ways, and again, I want to be careful because this isn't an amenity discussion because we're not asking for additional density as part of this proposal. The proponent is not asking for additional density, but in our zoning bylaw right now is supplementary regulations. In some zones, you get a baseline density, and through density bonusing, council can, if they choose, support increased density on a parcel without rezoning. And that would be subject to amenity negotiation. So it's a somewhat similar situation. But again, like I said, I want to be careful because this is not a situation where council can request extra amenities as part of the zoning process because no additional density is being provided for as part of this development. We need to look at the CD8 zone as a whole. And right now, as a whole, they're entitled to X amount of density, 16,600 bed units. Where those bed units go, that is the big question that's before council with this text amendment, not the total amount of density. But that is another example where density in that case can be increased without rezoning. shifts in density. Yeah, that would be unique to this development, I guess, but I would also argue that's the reason why it's a CD zone.
So, Mayor, through to council, we're going to council school tomorrow. We'll have an opportunity during that time. We'll be learning stuff, and probably one of the best things about this whole thing is we are learning so much procedural stuff, including myself. Your learning curve has been accelerated huge. So there's a lot of good that's coming out of that end of it. There'll be lawyers there. They won't give you legal advice, but they'll give you a question. Ask them the question. Just ask them the question when you're having coffee or lunch. Can council vary density without rezoning? Just ask that question.
All right,
Mayor Souls, I do have more to say.
okay, carry on.
Because I'm trying to convince my colleagues to defeat this. This thing is so confusing, and I think there is a better process. Basically, we need to look at those individual parcels, give the right density. And maybe I'm going to come at the end of this, and we'll go through the public hearing process. I probably will be speaking up I'll decide what I'm going to do as far as the public process. But if you think that somebody that's been in local government for 30 years is confused with this thing, and maybe, you can say for whatever reason that I'm confused on a whole bunch of aspects. And if you got this as clear as anything, that's great. But how is the public going to be viewing this? For them to understand the complexity behind this. Furthermore, again, just on the procedural thing, there was emails going back and forth, great questions. It's almost entering into the support of that belongs at this meeting. It's a missing piece. Again, on the procedural side, I would suggest that should be part of the public record. I'll leave it at that for now, Mayor Souls.
Okay, so any further comments or questions regarding second reading? So if this were to pass, my suggestion is that we recommend or that we insist that the proponent do a public information process within the next few weeks, and then they can present to the public how they feel this is going to go. Staff be present to explain from the staff side of things, and council and the community are welcome to be there, ask questions.
I do have one last question for the planner, and it's about this whole confusion of entitlements and stuff. So on another parcel, we're talking about shifts, so that 15 or various, so that 15% to, I'm just going to grab a number because we haven't had the whole dialogue on the other parcels and the implications. So say zone 7, just out of argument's sake. So at some time in the future, either this developer or someone else applies for a 15% shift. And the council of the day says, no, we're just absolutely not going to give it to you. Do you believe that council can just say, we don't need a reason, we're just shutting you down? Do you believe that would be the case?
Mr. Simon.
Through your worship to Councillor Palmer, the way that the wording in the text amendment is currently crafted, it is subject to approval of the city. It doesn't outline necessarily a list of criteria that need to be addressed. So if council's decision was to not approve the density, in my view, that would be aligned with their ability as the land use authority. And I do want to note that staff did get legal on the proposed wording in the text amendment, and the legal did come back that this is consistent with the council's ability as the land use authority to consider shifts in density. Again, it's a unique situation, but I would argue that this is a unique development form that we have here, being a complex resort development.
So, Mayor Souls, is that legal opinion? Is that available to council? And is that in a public document?
Mr. Simon, comment on that?
Through your worship, I'd have to chat with our corporate officer and the chief administrative officer about the legal opinions. I don't see any reason as to as to why there wouldn't be able to be, release of that information. But this is part of the tools that staff use when we are evaluating applications to make sure that we have something that is within the realm of best practice and within the legal administrative framework, so that we are making sure that council is set up for success when they are considering these decisions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Simon. Ms. Floyd or Mr. Parliament, comment?
Mr. Mayor, I would concur with our planner. I have seen the legal opinion. I have no problem sharing that because it's pretty clear in my mind as stated by the planner. So, with such a contentious issue before council, I think openness and transparency is paramount. I also want to add, in defense of the department called Corporate Services, and this whole reconsideration of this text amendment, this was carefully thought out. Okay. I don't believe procedure was violated. I don't think procedure is confusing to Councillor Palmer. The mayor chose, there were two options before the mayor. As per section 131 of the community charter, the mayor can bring back any resolution for reconsideration within 30 days. The second option was under our council procedural bylaw that says any councillor who voted against that motion can bring it back, but must bring it back by the next council meeting, which is today. The three, what we call the prevailing vote, the three that voted against the text amendment back on February the 14th, had an option to bring it forward today. They all had their different reasons because, according to what I know, I'm asking the corporate officer to confirm, there was no option to bring it back from the prevailing side. The mayor exercised his option as of section 131, which is why council sees it today. Okay. There was a lot of thought on that. The mayor did meet with all three members who voted against the last text amendment in the last 2 weeks, whether or not they wanted to exercise section 4.17 of the council procedural bylaw, which allows any councillor who voted against the motion to reconsider that motion. Failing that, the mayor then exercised his authority under section 131 of the community charter that says he or she, as the mayor, can bring it back within 30 days, which is why it's before council today. So I'm very comfortable with the work that Corporate Services did in stick handling this very delicate situation, because you're dealing with two different pieces of legislation. But there was an option before the mayor to exercise either one, and he chose to exercise section 131 of the community charter. Thank you.
Great, Councilor Palmer.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that I clarify. I think Corporate Services and our CEO is doing an outstanding job. I really do. I really super appreciate that. And the planning department, outstanding the work that's happening. Absolutely. And even to the developer, I made it clear in every meeting that I'm not opposed to the density shift on 4 and 5. The right approach would be looking at those and doing that shift directly and giving you the entitlements that are appropriate for your development and the community, not just the developer. And so I just want to make sure that's clear. That would be the better process, not getting the whole community in a tizzy of a misunderstanding. Keep a clean application. Give that density shift that's needed at this time. If another one's needed sometime in the future for one of the other zones, look at that separately. That would be a much better process, much cleaner, a lot less controversial than what we're going into.
All right, thank you. Any other comments on the motion on the table? So we're going to be voting on second reading with the stipulation that the proponent will do a public information seminar with the community.
Can that be a separate resolution after second reading?
Sure. Okay. I'll bring that forward. So we're basically doing second reading.
Any possibility of having two public hearings, just in the event that there's members of the public that, scheduling wise, they can attend one but not the other,
So we've asked the proponent.
Yeah. To Councillor Steveners, you talking about the public information
Yes,
session?
sir, that's correct.
I have reached out to the proponent. They've agreed and they're putting together plans to hold, I believe, an afternoon and evening session
Okay, perfect.
on a certain day in March prior to the public hearing, where it would give the public an opportunity. They can attend both, but it would be sort of a repeat to cover those that are worked during the day.
Just to address any scheduling conflict that the public might have in attending one or the other.
Yep, they're aware of that, and they're gonna make every effort to hold two separate information sessions to capture the afternoon crowd and the evening crowd.
Great, thank you.
All right. Any other comments or questions regarding the second reading? So we're now voting just on the second reading. All those in favor? Opposed? Note Councillor Palmer is opposed. Balance of council are in favor. Second reading is now passed. I'm going to put on the subsequent motion that the proponent do a public information session, do two of them, one in the evening, one in the afternoon, for the public prior to public hearing. So can I have a seconder for that motion, please? Councillor Staphenhurst. Any further discussion on that motion? Councillor Palmer.
So yeah, I wanted to wrap my mind around that a little bit. Okay, so we've done second reading. Now that's complete. The motion for the public hearing, that motion hasn't happened yet. Is that correct?
No.
Okay, so that'll be subsequent. So now we're instructing the developer to do a public information. And will staff be involved with that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
And
Staff have agreed to be present. Is that not correct?
I believe the proponents reached out to make sure the staff are available if there's any, legislative questions, understanding the CD zone, understanding the text amendment, and I believe will be available. I know I will be available. I believe planning will be available, so that's my understanding, yes.
And is council encouraged to attend this as well?
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Hussain.
Will be the advertising window for the proponents to put forth the date for this, just so they don't rush when they've advertised for when this hearing is actually happening to the public.
So any comments on that?
Through your worship to Councillor Lucia, there is no specific legislative advertisement for the proponent. So, I think if they're going through the effort to do a public information session, they're going to try to ensure that the entire community is contacted. I know that our local paper does ads, but that's something that's in their hands. So they'd have to determine that.
And they're in the room, so they just heard what you stated.
I believe, if I can ask, the intent is the third week of March, roughly. Is that correct?
Yeah.
That RMR, the proponent, will be looking at hosting an afternoon, evening session, the week of the 20th to the 23rd of March, and details will follow.
Okay, so let's vote on this and then I want to ask about public hearing. Okay, so any further discussion on the motion on the table? All those in favor? Motion's passed unanimously. Now, can we set the date for public hearing after that?
You could, your worship, but I feel like if you give the proponent some time to come up with a date, we could always set a public hearing on the March 14th for the 28th.
All right, good. All right, let's do that. Let's give them
That
some
way it
time.
gives them a little bit of room.
Yeah.
So just trying to get clarification. So are we putting a motion on the table for this?
No, we'll wait till the next meeting.
Well,
Or do you want to do it?
Oh,
now?
the advertising.
Yeah, we need
You do want
advertising.
to.
so yeah, there's Mayor Souls. I think there's two things. One, as was suggested there's a danger of not doing the public hearing in my mind. And so I think we need to make a resolution of some sort at this meeting
To do that.
because the province has changed, there's regulations have changed and we could technically bypass this public process and just charge ahead. And so I think this is important for me to have the public hearing. And then also for advertising, we don't necessarily have to specify the date in the resolution. I don't believe.
You don't have to, but it's cleaner if you do.
That's correct.
So do we want to set the date for the end of March?
Yes, March 28th.
March 28th. You want to make that motion for a public hearing?
A council meeting, or if you want it separate.
Okay, where is my calendar?
When's spring break?
18th through the 30th.
18th.
Okay, so you want to do it after that.
And then council is on, so council meetings in March is the
14 and 28.
28th.
Would be the
Mayor Souls, I would suggest that it not be done on a council day. So perhaps April 4th. And if that makes sense, I'll put the motion on the table.
So April 4th is a Tuesday, not a council day.
And I
Yeah.
suggest at 3 o'clock.
Okay, so you want to make that motion?
I can make that motion.
All right, is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Stapenhurst.
And probably should have that read back.
Okay.
Just to put pressure on.
Do you know anything?
I can, sorry, that the public hearing for zoning amendment bylaw number 2346 be scheduled for Tuesday, April 4th at 3 p.m.
Wonderful.
All right, any further discussion on the public hearing?
So I'll speak to the motion. So just for clarity, I do not think this should be going to the public, but because council as a whole has said that they want to go that, I respect that decision. So I'll support the motion.
All right, any other discussion on the public hearing? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed, no, motion's carried, thank you. We'll bring our councillor back in, please.
Still.
Now we're on fire.
Welcome back, councillor. All right, so I'm going to read an opening statement regarding public budget consultation. So in accordance with section 166 of the Community Charter, council must undergo public consultation prior to adopting the financial plan. This opportunity for consultation is intended to allow opportunities for citizens to comment and pose questions regarding the financial plan at a council meeting. The Director of Finance is online at this time to listen to public feedback and provide any points of clarification where required. Today, council is offering the public an opportunity to provide verbal comments respecting the proposed 2023 financial plan. Those wishing to speak before council today have been asked to add their name to the speakers list. Each speaker will be limited to 3 minutes. Comments must be relevant to the issue at hand. Comments are to be provided respectfully and in an orderly manner. Please observe the rules, and if you have any concerns with the manner in which this consultation is conducted, direct your comments to myself, the chair. Members of council may, if they wish, ask questions of you following the presentation of your comments. However, the main function of council members today is to listen to the views of the public. It is not the function of council at this time to engage in debate on the merits of the proposed budget with individual citizens. Everyone shall be given a reasonable opportunity to be heard at this meeting. No one will be or should feel discouraged or prevented from making his or her views heard. At the conclusion of today's consultation opportunity, the public will be given further opportunities to inform budget discussion in the following 3 ways. Through the city's Talk Revelstoke page, by emailing comments to budget@revelstoke.ca, and by submitting written submissions in person at City Hall. Be sure to address your written submissions to the attention of the Director of Finance. The opportunity to provide comments on the 2023 proposed budget will occur between February 28th through March 15th, 2023 at 4:30 p.m. With that, we will begin by opening the floor to the first speaker on the list. Please stand at the podium and begin by stating your name and address for the record, and you will have 3 minutes to share your feedback. So the first name on the list, Stuart Andrews. I believe Stuart has just put down a question mark whether he'll speak or not, and I believe he just walked out of the room. Is that correct? That's correct. Okay, we're going to move on to Karen LaChapelle. Carolyn, have I pronounced your name correctly?
pretty well, yes.
Okay. But you're not going to provide me with that? Yes, you are when you get up there. Provide me with your name and your address, please.
Caroline LaChapelle, 1158 Maple Road.
All right, thank you. Proceed. Please.
I'm here today on behalf of the Chamber of Commerce as the Executive Director. We want to thank you for this transparency and communication. We also want to thank you for accepting the letter that we sent on behalf of our membership with regards to commercial taxes. And we are really looking forward to having more conversations on the tax ratios between commercial and residential taxes in that retrospect. And yeah, we just wanted to come and say that we really appreciate this communication, and we would like you to reach out to us to let us know how we can better communicate with you on behalf of Revelstoke businesses for this specific subject. Thank you.
Thanks, Carolyn. Any comments or questions from council? Councilor Palmer?
Yeah, I just had one question regarding, you sent a letter regarding
Commercial.
the commercial and the balance between residential. Do you have any sort of further comments on that at this point, or?
I don't have any further comments on our ask of potentially leaving tax ratios for commercial businesses as is, as they were in 2022. The reason why I don't have any comments is because I've had some really great feedback from city employees that have been able to answer a lot of our questions, and we are looking forward to seeing what the feedback from the community looks like, as well as at the meeting on March 16th, I believe. And is it Sheena? Am I pronouncing?
Shanna?
Shanna, yeah, she's doing a really great job at keeping us sort of in the know. And yeah, we're just really here to ensure that the relationship between the Chamber of Commerce and who we represent and the city is well received, and that we can help out with feedback as much as possible.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Shanna, you're online. Any comments regarding statements from the chamber?
Through your worship, no comments that are significant, just that I have had a few discussions with Carolyn and the chamber about the budgeting process and what that looks like, and that I let her know that there is a tax distribution report coming forward to council on March 16th that will discuss the distribution amongst tax classifications.
All right, thank you for that, Shannon. So then my next name on the list is Nathan Weston. Nathan's still in the room, or is he? Nathan, do you want to speak? Sure. All right, thank you. I know I've got your name and everything here, Nathan, but if you could provide your name and your civic address.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. My name is Nathan Weston, civic address 233 Mears Crescent in Revelstoke. I don't have a lot to say, but was involved with the finance focus group back in 2012, 2015, 2014. So I've looked at budgets and spreadsheets till the cows come home. Some of the recommendations that we've had over the years have made its way through. It's great to see that this document is easier to read than it has been in times past. That being said, a few things that come to mind. I would have had more to say today, but this document only came out, I believe, on Thursday of last week, so it didn't give us much time to be able to gather our thoughts and contribute, especially when we work during the day, but I was able to make it. It would also be great, staff has actually helped finding the consolidated financial statements for years past, because although we can read what the document shows today, especially given that I've been here all my life and pretty interested in seeing the financials to date, it's good to see where we've come from to how we got to this point, because every year we have the same argument: 3%, 4%, 5%, 10% tax increase. That is the question before council all the time. It doesn't take into account previous, it's kind of the blanket statement for everything. It doesn't look at the undercurrent, and it's very easy for costs to continue. I'm a small business owner. I have to rein in costs all the time. Council, it is the unenviable position that you're in to set a tax rate. I don't envy it. But that being said, citizens are not a ATM machine, and I know that council does not treat them as such. However, in the climate that we're in, everybody is counting costs wherever it may be. So there is additional scrutiny on how we are spending our money. I know in my own business, I have to scrutinize and find the costs. In councils of the past, we've seen where they have asked for cost cuts, and unfortunately, the items that have been brought forward are the hot button topics. We will cut fire department, we will cut snow removal, and unfortunately for council, citizens come forward, obviously very upset that that would be considered a cut, and council is forced to withdraw from those potential cuts. Not saying that those are the appropriate places to cut, but the discussion of zero-based budgeting, looking at that way of dealing with finances, not just a blanket 2, 3, 4%, 5% increase. We have to look at right down to the bottom line. I know there are costs in the department from when I talk to staff of where we have spent money that we maybe shouldn't have. I know there are places in the planning department where there are costs that we've spent and now we can't use them. There are places that money can be saved. It would be great for the public to know that those have been taken. Because obviously managers, they're doing what their job is to steward our money well. It would be great for the public to hear some of those stories so they go, yes, they are making those changes. Here's the reason why or why not can we do that. So I can't really say much about the budget itself. I've asked staff to find the consolidated financial statements because I would like to see history going back several years. Fortunately, the only one that is on the website is last year's, and I have been instructed to go through the Civic website to dig through the financial meeting or the council meetings, I should say, of May, March, April, May, somewhere around in there, and basically try and find in the council meeting when that consolidated financial statement was brought forward. They used to be available on the city website, so it would be great if they were made more readily accessible.
I appreciate that comment because that's something that we can look at. Thank you for that. Ms. Moore, a comment to Mr. Weston on some of his questions or concerns.
Sure. I would just like to note for Mr. Weston that if he would like to provide further feedback, we are accepting feedback in writing at budget@revelstoke.ca, talk.revelstoke.ca, and in person until March 15th. I know that this public consultation was a quick turnaround given that council is away next week. So if you do have further feedback, please don't hesitate to reach out. And I will comment that I can certainly provide the consolidated financial statements. At the moment, we currently only have the most recent set available online, but I have no issues forwarding those to you or posting them online.
All right, thank you.
Great. Council, any comments for Mr. Weston before he leaves the podium? Councilor Paul.
Yeah, thank you, Nathan, for your comments and for the service that you've done in the past for the community. Interesting. I think I also mentioned about the historical thing a few times, and that maybe a little bit of a weakness on council. Of course, we've got new council again, but that weakness of sort of understanding where we've been is possibly just as important, maybe more important as to what those percentage increases. So I appreciate your comments. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Weston. Appreciate it. All right. I have no one else on the speakers list. So if there's anyone in the room that would like to speak, please come forward. We'd love to hear your opinion. No one else? All right, I think that's basically all that we have regarding budget consultation in this room this afternoon. So we will end it at that point. But as Ms. Moore has said, there will be the ability to continue giving input. We want to hear your voice. We want to hear what you have to say and some of your concerns. And you can do that through the various methods that I mentioned earlier. So thank you for being here and for giving us the benefit of your comments. All right, just going on to announcements from the mayor, just so the community is aware, local government is putting on a seminar in Kelowna for the next 3 days. So most of council will be there Wednesday, Thursday, and half of Friday. We call that council school, so it's the ability for council to learn some of the aspects of the job. Great, we're going to move on to recommendation from committees. So I have 8A, a recommendation from committee of the whole, and that is split into 3 parts. Does someone want to put the first motion on, and then we can have discussion on that. So 8A, committee of the whole. Let's put that forward. Councillor Lucille.
I move that support be provided in principle for the implementation of a bylaw dispute adjudication system for the city of Brooks.
Seconder for the motion, please. Councillor Cherry. Discussion on this motion. So this is basically moving from the system that we have now, or in addition to the system we have now, to a adjudication system where then we don't have to be present to, we don't have the proponents that would receive bylaw disputes present. We can actually mail them to them or leave them at their home, that sort of thing. Any further comments regarding that, Ms. Floyd? None?
Your worship, I think that the committee of the whole discussion was really good.
All right. So any further discussion on this motion? All those in favor? Motion's carried unanimously. Someone want to put the second part on, please? Councillor Devlin.
I move that staff be supported to work with the Court Services Branch, Ministry of Attorney General to request the Lieutenant Governor and Council of the Province of British Columbia enact regulation under Section 29 of the Local Government Bylaw Notice Enforcement Act, applying the act to the city of Revelstoke.
Seconder for the motion, please. Councillor Cherry. Any further discussion on this motion? Basically asking the government to enact what we want. All those in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Item number 3, please. Someone want to put that? Councillor Cherry.
I move that staff prepare the necessary bylaws, policies, and agreements for the implementation of the bylaw dispute adjudication system provided in the Local Government Bylaw Notice Enforcement Act for the council's consideration.
Seconder for the motion, please. Councillor Palmer. Any further discussion on this motion? Councillor Palmer, then Councillor Lucille.
Yeah, so just a general comment for anybody that's maybe watching, that there's often a criticism of the city not enforcing bylaws. And this is far from perfect, but this is going to create more ability to do the enforcement aspect. So it's a good move,
Right.
especially for those that get irritated when the city doesn't enforce, because we can't.
Councillor Lucille.
Thanks, Mayor Scholes. I just have a question around the collections process and registering the debt with the province. Is that a labor intensive process for us as a municipality?
I don't believe so, but Ms. Floyd, any comment?
Councillor Lucio, I am not 100% sure of the intensive or the labor required for that. I don't believe it is going to be a lot. My guess is that quite often when an adjudication system comes in, the fees are lower, so people will just pay them rather than it going to collections.
Okay. Any other comments?
The fees collected from the ticketing process, those stay within the community, is that correct? Is that my understanding?
It is, I wonder, is the interim director of finance?
Ms. Moore, are you still online? Did you hear the question?
Can you please repeat the question, Your Worship?
Sure. Councillor?
Yeah, my question was in regards to the fees collected from the education system that's about to be implemented. Do those fees stay within the community, or does that go into a general fund, or how are those fees collected and distributed?
I would assume that they would be collected similar to the MTI and would come into our general operating fund as an increased revenue. I'm not as familiar with the adjudication system as Ms. Floyd. However, I would assume that we would be the direct beneficiary of these tickets that would be issued, and we would receive the revenue. Okay. And this would show up as an increased revenue item on our operating budget.
Answer your question, Councillor.
I think so, thank you.
Any further questions, Councillor Lucille?
With the adjudication process, would all of our bylaws be captured under the adjudication process? Or are we able to choose bylaws that we don't use that as a form of enforcement?
Through your worship to Councillor Lucio, we can do both.
Okay.
So it depends on what the bylaw officer thinks is the most appropriate. MTI is an easy way to do it if the offender lives in town and they can serve a ticket easier. But there's the option to do either or.
Okay. Yeah, I think there is just, when we talk about people living in their vehicles, ways for that to be abused. I'm not saying the bylaw officers would be doing that. I just have to put that concern out to council and to the public. Another question I have is through the adjudication process, does this open us up to be able to have a speed camera that could enforce the speed limits down by our heights? No.
Unfortunately, the RCMP do this speed.
Okay.
That's provincial legislation.
Okay.
Just to Councilor Lucio's question in regards to the speed camera, is there any way of maybe drafting a letter for Silga to maybe look at some, implementing that policy? Because I've seen it implemented in other big cities, and I mean it's quite beneficial, and especially like when we have limited resources for police officers, what do we want,
And so my understanding when it comes to speed, that's a provincial thing. So it's only the provincial police that can do the speed or the ticketing on the speed. We have, as you know, going up to the ski hill, we have a thing that tells people what their speed is. And years ago when we had our school reps would be able to utilize what the RCMP auxiliary had for a signboard and put it out and stand beside and kind of shame people your speed is, that sort of thing. There was no ticketing process with that. Years ago, there was photo radar in the province. And again, that was provincially mandated, but then that was something that one of the governments took out for whatever reason.
Yeah.
So that's not something that we have that conversation with Silga, but it is a provincial legislation.
Okay.
All right, any further discussion on the motion on the table? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion's carried, thank you. All right, moving on to staff reports, 11A, Lower Arrow Heights Local Area Service. Someone put that motion up?
Can you please do the corporate,
Oh, my apologies. I passed right over the one that we've been trying to get done for a while. Let's go 9A bylaws, adoption of fees and charges. So someone will put that motion, Councilor Lucio.
I move that fees and charges amendment bylaw number 2350 be adopted.
Seconder for the motion, please. Councilor Devlin. Any discussion on this motion? So we had inadvertently missed a few things and now that's there in the amended motion. So we got all the fees and charges for the whole complete city of Revelstoke on that. All right, all those in favor? Motion's carried, thank you. All right, now we're going to move on to 11A. Someone want to put that motion on the table for me? Councilor Devlin.
Move that the initiation of the Lower Arrow Heights Local Area Services Project be supported.
Seconder for the motion, please. Councilor Orlando, discussion on the motion. So bear with me for just a moment here. Mr. Black, you're here in the room. I couldn't see you on the screen. My apologies. Do you want to make any comment or do you have a presentation regarding that you would like to discuss?
Thank you, Your Worship. I have no presentation today. As stated in the report, this is to allow council to be aware of an ongoing project that was approved in the fall of last year, so that once the project becomes initiated, which we assume on a positive vote of today, will begin next week. And we just wanted to make sure that as staff, council wasn't surprised by community members reaching out quickly without any background information.
All right. And I know that we've had community initiated this process, came to us saying, hey, we'd like to have this in our neighborhood because of the lift station placed in on Newlands Road. So any comments or questions from council regarding this local area service Councilor Orlando.
Your worship, yeah, I just want to thank staff for working with me today. I had some questions and some outstanding things I wanted to see, including just the petition and some initial cost estimates. So thank you for providing that. It helps me understand sort of the process so far.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments from council? Councilor Palmer.
Thank you, Mayor Souls. Just a couple questions of clarification. So this motion is basically, what's the right description of it? It's not really necessary. The direction's already given by council previously to proceed. And then a question to staff on even if council was to reject this, what's the requirement for the local government when there's a petition on local service projects? And sorry, I'm not trying to put you on the spot. I didn't ask you before, but I think there's an entitlement people to put that petition. So I'm just not sure if it's changed in recent years.
Yes, your worship, through Councillor Palmer. I am not 100% sure, but I do believe that the project doesn't proceed without 50% of the people in the area and 50% of the value. So I think that it's incumbent upon the community or upon staff to go forward and let it either be successful or not through that process.
And then, so Mayor Souls, I think that's an important, maybe we should just get that clarification because I think this is going to be somewhat of a controversial project. There's definitely some people that are very concerned about the project and the implications there. I just see that as being inevitable. Some technical things, but I think it's really important for us to clearly understand what the rights of the residents in that area. And then I think a question is, and maybe there's not an answer right now, but as we move ahead, but clarification on what staff resources go into this. And then even though we've seen this initial petition, it's not being accepted as to meet the requirements of going ahead with the local service area. It's just initiating going ahead with that potential petition, an official petition. So sometimes I believe that is done totally just driven by the residents. And so how much work are we doing and what's the implication on staff time? I'm not looking for an answer right now. It might be important for us to understand that.
Sure.
And then I do think it's going to be, there's definitely some controversy. There's some people that have already reached out and some concerns about what this actually looks like and getting right down to some of the engineering stuff that, so I certainly don't want to be doing the work of engineering, but understanding what, at a lay level, what, the concerns are and how that's being addressed. I think that's going to be, we're going to need to be able to answer those questions that are out there. I've definitely had people approach me wanting to take me out there to show me the engineering stuff. And at this point, I've resisted that. So that belongs with staff. Thank you, Mayor Souls.
Thank you for your comment. Any other comments, Councilor Romano?
Yeah, your worship, just following a little along the lines of what Councilor Palmer was saying, and just in a little bit of research on my part, local area services can be initiated by the city or by petitioners, and that was why it was important to me to see the petition and see the residents who were, asking for the service. To me, that satisfies the requirement that this is a citizen-driven petition. One of the things I'm we're always concerned about is that, or I guess one observation I'll make is that local area services tend to be, some people want them and some people really don't want them. So I think council needs to be aware of that it's, it's sort of inevitably that way. I just wanted to make sure myself to see the paperwork and make sure we're off to the right start on this and we're following the process as is prescribed. And I feel we're doing that. And it likely will have some opponents to it, but that's just the nature of this beast.
Sure. Those who want new sewer system because they've lived in the neighborhood for a period of time and will need to do some sort of upgrade either to the septic or join the city system will be in favor, I think. And those who have newer residents and have spent 20 or 30 or $40,000 on their septic system will be looking at this going, why would I want to do this at this point in time? So we're going to hear those comments, and so the process going through 50% of the people plus 50% of the assessed value to bring this to fruition. But we're also going to hear from those who in any event couldn't afford it. So we need to be cognizant of that. And as Councilor Palmer said, what's the process? And so we need to understand that as we move forward.
Yeah, so just clarification, and thank you, Councilor Orlando. So I think we're clearly understanding this is a citizen-driven process, and yet I believe it hasn't met that threshold yet. So we're enabling the citizen. So there is a component of the city. Ultimately, with this support, we're supporting that citizen-led process to get all the I's dotted and the T's crossed. I believe, I'm not 100% certain, that if you meet that threshold, that 50 plus 50, then it proceeds, and it's not even a council decision, but I'm not 100% sure. I believe it proceeds if that's the will of the citizens. Yeah. So and then I guess just further on that, in bigger communities, I think local service improvements just happen. That's really unless it's a city-driven process, then it's when it's a citizen-led, it just happens at the staff level. So ultimately, there won't be a decision for us to say go or don't go. That will be the citizens.
Right. All right. So any further comments on the motion on the table? Saying none. All those in favor? Opposed? No. Motion's carried unanimously. All right. Moving on to item 11B, development variance permit DVP 2023004 for 415 2nd Street West. So, Mr. Simon, do you have a bit of presentation that you would like, or are you okay with me putting the motion on the table and then we get the presentation?
Through your worship, certainly okay if you want to put the resolution on the table, and I do have a very brief presentation should council wish to hear it.
Yep, council will want to wish. Councilor Palmer.
Yeah, I'll put the motion on the table as written. Okay. Or do you want it read out?
No, that's fine. Seconder for the motion, Councilor Cherry. Okay, Mr. Simon, if you would like to give your presentation, please.
Thank you, your worship. If there's any issues with seeing the screen, please let me know. So we have a development variance permit application. This variance is specifically looking to vary the minimum lot width and lot size requirements at 415 2nd Street West. So the property is zone C2, which is the downtown fringe commercial zone. It's currently developed with 2 buildings. One is a mixed use building with commercial on the main floor and 1 residential unit above, and then a single-story commercial building as well on the subject property, surrounded by residential and commercial. So the proposal is specifically to reduce the minimum lot area and the lot width in order to allow for a subdivision so that each building has its own separate titled lot. They could do this through a strata subdivision, but the preference of the owner is to do this through a typical bare land subdivision. So you can see the minimum lot size within the zoning bylaw for C2 is 550 square meters. And they want to reduce it for lot 1 to 477 square meters and for lot 2 for 452 square meters. The proponent is currently at the conclusion of the subdivision process, and the approval of this variance would be the last step that is required to sign off on the final subdivision plan. And upon receipt of the final subdivision plans, that is when it was noted that the proposal did not comply with minimum lot size as well as minimum lot width. The lot width reduction is from 15 meters to 14.83 meters for proposed lot 2. So the staff evaluation of this is to support the proposed reduction in lot size and lot width. By reducing lot size, it doesn't impact the ability of each lot to contain the principal building. These buildings are existing, so it really doesn't have any impact on the ability of the lot to contain a principal use on site. Both lots will comply with the maximum density provisions as contained within the C2 zone. The minimum lot width reduction is really minor for proposed lot 2. It's only 1.13%. And one of the big things that lot width is intended to ensure is that we have sufficient access to the proposed lot, and access is not impeded. They do have access via the laneway here as well. And one other thing to note, and it is kind of a bigger level of discussion, but with the zoning bylaw comprehensive rewrite that is currently about to be initiated, we will be re-examining all of these lot width and lot size minimums with the intent of trying to support further infill development. I don't think it's a surprise. You can speak with our community economic development group. There is a shortage of commercial space within the city. So all of these lot size minimums do need to be revisited to look at how we can incentivize further infill development to support more commercial activities in the city. So that leads me to the staff recommendation as shown on the screen, and council already put the resolution on the table. So there is no need for me to reiterate it. And that concludes my presentation. If there's any questions, happy to answer them.
Councilor Cherry.
Thanks, your worship. Through your worship, Mr. Simon. There's been a lot of conversation today about procedures. I'm just curious why this wasn't subdivided prior to a building permit being issued.
Through your worship to Councillor Cherry, the way that the current zone is set up, there was no requirement for them to subdivide. So you'll see some municipalities, their zoning bylaws are structured where we'll have a requirement in there, for instance, that says no more than one principal use per lot. Our zoning bylaw doesn't have that. So as long as you comply with the overall provisions, lot coverage, overall density, there's no requirement for you to subdivide or stratify so that each lot only contains one principal use.
And that's just for the C2 zoning or C zonings?
Through your worship to Councillor Cherry, if I'm remembering correctly off the top of my head, that would be universal across most industrial and commercial zones.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Any other comments or questions from council? Councillor Palmer, then Councillor Lucian.
Yeah, so I think I talked to the planner before on that. So we have the zoning, we're looking at the zoning, and some of this stuff seems like it should just be entrenched and would have gone ahead rather than. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to those zoning changes that you're working on. Thank you.
Councillor Lucian.
Yeah, just a comment about the report. It would have been nice to have a current picture of the development of 2 buildings on site rather than this dated picture that we have. Yeah.
Okay, any further questions or concerns? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? No, motion's carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Simon. All right, we're going to move on to item 11C, subdivision requirement exemption request. You have a bit of a presentation with that, Mr. Simon.
Through your worship, no presentation, but just a real general overview. We have a subdivision again that is at the conclusion of its process. Upon receipt of the final subdivision approval plan, there's an old regulation in the Local Government Act that requires lot frontage to meet the minimum requirements of the zoning bylaw, as well as have 10% of the perimeter of the lot front onto a public roadway. So you can see with this particular application, they have a 10-lot subdivision, 6 of the lots are pie-shaped, so they don't meet that 10% requirement. However, access has already been demonstrated to be in accordance with the subdivision development and servicing standards. And with most municipalities, this would actually be delegated to the approving officer because it really is a subdivision consideration. But our delegation bylaw does not currently have that in there. So this is why you have this request coming before council. There's no concerns from staff's perspective, again, because access has already been demonstrated in accordance with our servicing standards. But this is the final step that's needed to allow for final registration to get this this waiver or exemption from council in accordance with that clause of the Local Government Act. So if there's any questions, again, happy to answer.
Any questions, council? So I'll ask somebody to put the motion on the table, please.
I'll put the motion on the table and then I have a comment.
All right. Moved by Councillor Palmer. We have a seconder for that motion. Councillor Cherry, do you have comments or questions, Councillor Palmer?
Yeah. So I'll be voting in favor of this. I do have some questions, and I referred to this before, sort of some of the innovative approaches that planning, which I'm very supportive, and it's how far we go. I know that there's similar communities to us that the planners or engineering would not be supportive of this kind of configuration. I'm generally in favor of it because it's getting better density and infill uses. Couple of questions. So one, did the fire department make comment on this? Because that would be one that I've seen in other communities where they have concerns about access for firefighting purposes.
Through your worship to Councillor Palmer, yes, this would have, the subdivision itself would have gone to the fire department to sign off on as part of the preliminary layout review process.
Right. And then the second question I have is, so this is intended to be a strata. One of the immediate challenges, if this had already existed in the past weekend, would have been quite a challenge with snow on that particular little cul-de-sac. If this was a public, it was going to be a public road, would this have been approved, I guess, or been supported it? And that might be more of an engineering question.
Yeah, Mr. Black's prepared to answer it, Councilor Palmer.
Thank you.
Through your worship, this subdivision was approved utilizing the same requirements that were used if in fact it was a public service road. So we don't treat these differently. We do have some more options for this type of development because we can, because of the compactness of it, can go with a narrower road section. And you know, there's not going to be a lot of traffic in the future. So other than that, everything else would be typical standard engineering design guidelines.
Right, good. That's, I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah,
that's all my comments.
All right. Any other comments from council? Councilor Cherry.
I just want to kind of congrats the applicant for getting 10 lots out of a very difficult, what was a single family lot.
Absolutely.
Everyone's aware that we need more housing, and this is a great start to that. So I'm excited to see this get off the ground.
Yes, it's really ingenious. I think about years ago with one of my lots and how we were told I couldn't do this sort of thing, and being able to bring this forward and see it come. I'm impressed and quite happy, so I'm supportive. Any other comments from council? Councilor Slayton?
No.
Okay. All those in favor? Motion is carried unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Simon. All right, we're moving on to RMI funding proposal allocations. Ms. Braun, do you have a bit of a presentation before we move this forward?
I do not, Your Honor, but I can speak briefly to the report in front of you. So this is our new resort development strategy approved by the previous council in the fall of 2022. And our contribution agreement was recently signed by the Ministry of Tourism, Arts and Culture in January. And we immediately invited our recreation and arts and culture partners to submit applications for funding. The majority of the funds, as you can see in the attached budget, are allocated towards capital assets, tourism infrastructure projects that are basically built and managed by either Director Black or Director Donato. So we've put a lot of the funds into our multi-use pathways, into improving amenities such as a floating dock at dog parks, that kind of thing in our city parks. But we do set aside a certain amount of funds to provide to our partners to build those kinds of amenities outside the city borders, and to ensure that events and programs and services delivered by not-for-profit organizations in town can be funded with this pot of funding to enhance visitor experiences. So I'll take any questions if there are any regarding the specifics, but the attached financial plan shows you the applications received from various groups and those that the Tourism Initiatives Committee recommended for approval. And those are in front of you now.
All right, good. So, Councillor Orlando, I'm going to ask you to put this motion on the table, and once it's seconded, if you want to speak to it as well, and then if there's any questions. So.
Sure. So item D, I move that resort municipality initiative funding of $270,000 be approved for the following project categories. A, recreation trails and infrastructure, $66,000. arts and culture, infrastructure, 50,000, events, programming and services, 162,000.
Seconder for the motion, Councillor Cherry. Councillor Orlando, do you want to speak to this?
Yeah, sure. As discussed, the Tourism Infrastructure Committee met on February 14th and reviewed the applications. Within each of these categories, the projects are itemized within the report, so you can see what the funding is for, and I think that's about it. And if anyone has any councillors have any questions, I can answer them.
Any questions, councillors?
Just for clarification, because I must have heard something wrong. Did I hear floating dog park?
No, but
That is correct.
That exists in a couple locations.
Yes, through your worship to Councillor Cherry, forgive my lapse. It is a floating dock and a proposed dog park at Powerhouse Road, not to be combined unless Director Donato has some plans of which I am unaware. That was my.
Oh my God, I love that. Okay, good. Thanks for catching that. Any further comments on the RMI funding? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Wayfinding signage phase 2. Someone want to put that motion on the table, and then we can discuss that. Do you have a presentation, Mr. Black?
Your worship.
Okay, good. Councillor Orlando.
Yeah, so for item E, I move that the signage and wayfinding project be awarded to Imperial Signage in the amount of $266,520, excluding applicable taxes.
Seconder for the motion, please. Councillor Stapleton. Now we have map signage that was handed out at the beginning. If you have any questions, you want to have a brief look at that, you can, and then we can ask questions of Mr. Black. Councillor Orlando, you sit at this committee. Do you have any further comments regarding this?
Yeah, so this is part of an ongoing signage and wayfinding project. This is phase 2. Phase 1, you can see some of the signage around town. I did ask for some supplemental information. The documents in there show you the costing, but it didn't actually show you where exactly some of them go. So I've got some more clarification today. A lot of this phase is related to signage connecting some of the new trails that are connecting our heights up towards the golf course, down to the bridge. And then this package that was handed out today has,
on the screen,
and on the screen too, has some more visuals of the types of signage that are going in. Yeah, I think that's the basics of it.
Yeah. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, I will ask a question. All those in favor? Motion's carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Braun. Thank you, Mr. Black and Councillor Orlando. Moving on to 13A, Communications, Social Development Committee meeting minutes. Councillor Luceau, any comment on those minutes?
Yeah, so the RCMP came and talked to us about their focus for enforcement. 3 of them are traffic-based, so we're looking at impaired driving, speeding in school zones, and towards the ski hill and distracted driving. They've asked for any input on where their priority should be. They also wanted to bring up the decriminalization of illicit substances that started January 31st. They are unaware of how that's going to affect the community, but just wanted to bring that forward as some people aren't aware of that. Destination Management did their survey and got 1,100 responses, with housing obviously being the biggest concern. High quality of life, but people are feeling that it is getting that it's degrading, and everyone is enjoying our investments in arts and culture in the community.
Right.
And then the poverty reduction strategy, which will be coming forward to council for approval, looks at more than just affordability and will help when it comes to the living wage and access to grants in the future.
Awesome. Thank you for that comment. Any questions for Councilor Lucio?
One council for Councilor Lucio is in regards to, there was an email that came out earlier today in regards to the numbers of deaths from the illicit drugs. So if it comes up in conversation, how can we roll out like a naloxone program, getting that into like as many, public places as possible, city-owned vehicles, things of that nature. I'd be interested in having that conversation with you.
That I'm not 100% aware of. I know that there is a little bit of training that comes along with that, but the RCMP was in support of that, and we talked about the locations. So there are some at both Community Connections buildings, but he was supportive of that being in more buildings.
It's from my understanding, depends on how you administer it. The naloxone, I mean, it's pretty. There is no detrimental effect of giving it if it's not needed, and it's as easy as giving it an EpiPen. If you've ever done EpiPen training or anything of that nature. So
yeah,
but happy to entertain that conversation with you at any point. So I think as we move forward, I think it'd be time and money well spent. Just ensure that we have those policies in place to ensure public safety.
Yeah, agreed.
All right, thank you for that. Seeing no other comments, let's move on to Revelstoke Chamber of Commerce. Snow removal impacts the business survey results of January 2023. Mr. Parliament, do you want to discuss any of that?
Sure, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So in my two main discussions with the chamber regarding the infamous holiday snow event of 2022, and consistent with their participation in our budget deliberations, I asked them to share with us the results of their survey and their in-depth discussions with their members regarding snow removal, and also offering their assistance in revising our snow removal policy. And so what you see here is a result of that survey, and also a commitment that they would like to work with the city to make it better moving forward, particularly for those businesses that front Mackenzie, front First and Second and Third, et cetera, the downtown core area, to make it better moving forward. So I asked them to submit this, and they share this with you today. Thank you.
All right. Any comments or questions regarding this survey? Councilor Palmer?
Thank you, Mr. Parliament, and thank you to the Chamber for doing this work. Is really helpful. Certainly from my perspective, the event during the Christmas holidays was not the service that we're used to. I think even though we continue to get complaints on the last snowfall, I think we just do an outstanding job, and I really applaud the work that Public Works and the crew, and that is who we are. Here we are, 48 hours, and I walked here on a multi-use pathway with no problem at all, and it's just astounding. And it's a level of service that the taxpayers pay for, and I certainly appreciate that. And I think I was really happy to see that. I think one of the I mentioned this before, but one of the fundamental things when we're looking at service level is we are a 7-day-a-week. We don't have a day of rest on Sunday in Revelstoke, and so I think maybe we need to be looking at the shift on getting into a 7-day operation, and I think that would alleviate a lot of the problems. But that's being looked at from administration, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, and I was quite pleased with Mr. Black and the way that his staff were able to get out, even to get roads open quickly. Some people were not happy. I get that. I drove down some roads where it was hard to get down, even in all-wheel drive. However, I had lots of good comments yesterday from members of the community thanking us for our crews and the work that they've been doing. And they really were quick at getting things done. So, Mr. Parliament.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On a final note, just want to make a couple of comments. One, I'm learning the mechanics and the logistical challenges of the Public Works crew when a major dump occurs. This was just above 50 centimeters. And I share this with you because I found it interesting. And being that both Councillor Cherry and I play recreation hockey, we receive a lot of questions in the dressing room after the game. And so I just want you to know that Councillor Cherry does back you guys and takes a beating with some of these questions from the residents on snow removal. But a reminder to all of council that, you know, Public Works uses the 10 centimeter rule. It's not written, it's not in a policy, but the first 10 centimeters, there's really no action for the most part because you can't mobilize and scramble every time there's a snow event and it's just under 10 centimeters. It's just going to melt. And why would you spend thousands of dollars? In the question of this weekend, I was asked, you know, why wasn't the crew deployed earlier? Friday night, Saturday morning. By the time that 10 centimeter threshold hit, a decision was made at roughly 2 a.m. on Sunday to deploy the extra crew because they knew there was going to be a large dump of snow coming. And so there's always that delay because of that sort of 10 centimeter thing. So I just share that with you. I found that quite interesting because it is common for the resident to ask the minute the snow falls, why isn't the crew deployed? There is sort of that delay to see how much snow is going to fall. And then they hit that critical point and they just deploy the full force. And that full force was deployed at 2 a.m. on Sunday. The second thing I want is you know, kudos to Cindy Floyd and Corporate Services for getting a message out on the snow dump. That was one of the main criticisms during the Christmas break is that there wasn't any communication or press release or notice to the public of what was happening. This was an attempt to rectify that, and it's disappointing for me to see some of the criticisms that follow. I think most people were appreciative of the humor and that we reacted quickly to get the word out saying, if you can, stay at home, give it a couple of days. If you're in a remote residential street, we will make a pass for you. But I was disappointed to see there's some negativity directed at the city and the attempt to communicate, which was a complete opposite of what happened over the Christmas season. So again, I just want to applaud that. I thought both the message and the humor was well timed, and I support that moving forward. So thank you.
Yes, and I'm appreciative of that as well. And, you know, for some of us who are, you know, out in our neighborhood, you get 3 or 4 of us out there with snow blowers cleaning the sidewalks so that we can get ahead of things for our residents, keep them off the city streets because we know our city staff are busy in other areas of the community. That's what community is all about. I love the humor. I was looking to see if I had any quality tea, but I couldn't find any, so maybe I should stick to something else. But anyway, thank you for that and getting the message out, but also for our staff and saying, hey, we need to work harder at this. So just appreciative of that all in all. And again, good comments from community members that were appreciative. You know, some members saying, hey, I have a little car. I couldn't get around, but I got a ride to where I needed to. And in a short time, I was able to get my car out and get around. So, you know, those are positive things. So we look at that and go, you know, it is what it is. So anyhow, we're going to move on. Questions from the press. So Ms. Rousseau, do we have any questions from the press?
No questions from the press, Your Worship.
All right, thank you for that. I'd like to move in camera pursuant to section 90.1C of the community charter. So I want to make that motion for me, please. Councillor Cherry, Councillor Staples, all in favor? Motion's carried. We'll move in camera. We'll take a 5-minute break and then